Welcome everyone, Karen Itin here. Welcome to my channel. I want to talk to you today about some tips on fitting curvy body types, right? So I don't have a mannequin that is, curvy, I guess I would say, to be able to show you in that style of a video. But I am going to give you just some tips on things that I've come across in fitting curvy body types, so I can give you some pointers, I guess. And it's very difficult sometimes to fit curvy body types because, for one, a lot of the time when they're buying their garments, they're buying it to fit their largest body parts. You know what I mean? Their largest area. So a lot of times people will buy a larger size just to get the hips the right fit for the hips, right? And then the whole upper portion is larger, right? So sometimes you have to take in the shoulders, you have to take in the sides underneath the arms. It just depends. So one tip I want to give you is to, first of all, make sure that they have on the undergarments that they are going to wear with that garment. So if you're fitting them in a formal dress, or you're fitting them in, some whatever the clothing may be, but make sure they're wearing the right, undergarments that they're going to be wearing when they wear that outfit. Like if they're going to a wedding and they are going to wear a shaper thing undergarment under there, make sure they have that on when you do the fitting. It'll come out so much truer, right? So you want to make sure that you do that and make sure that they do bring, their undergarments and do have their undergarments on at the fitting, especially if it's some sort of a event that they're going to and it's a formal wear garment, right? So then number two is to, a lot of times what I was saying is they buy a larger size so they can get the hips to fit. So then a lot of times you have to take it in under the arms. So you may be taking it in under the arms, down through the waistline. So it just kind of depends on each person's body style type, right? So you'll want to just, one thing that I can say is when you pin it, you want to be precise in your pinning. So you want to pin it just exactly where they want it. And then when you go to take it in, make sure that you measure and you are taking it in just as the pins state, right? Just as the pins are, and not trying to just come up with a number that will look good, Say if you pinned, 3/8 of an inch and you're going to sew a 1/2 of an inch just to, because that's what you want to sew. Make sure that you're sewing exactly what it is, the amount that you are pinning. That's how you come out truer to the fitting being perfect, right? So you want to make sure that you do that. And you also want to make sure, another tip is to, a lot of times people who are larger love to wear some sort of a shell. They love to cover up their arms, they love to cover up their sleeves, things like that. And one thing that can be done is you can put a little gusset in underneath the arm, right? You can put in a little triangle underneath the armpit that gives a relaxed, sleeve, right? So you want to make sure that you, consider options when it comes to, fitting. You may have to add some extra material in there for the gusset. And but it can release the sleeve if you don't have enough material in there to let out the seam, right? A lot of times factory nowadays are cutting the seams all the way down to the edge, right? And we don't have a lot of give when we want to go in there and release something. They don't give us enough material to release it. So you want to make sure that that you could add some materials. Say, for instance, if you cut off maybe a dress, this is for an example, if you cut off and hem the dress, then leave that material that you can use for the armpit gusset, so it matches the same thing. So that's what I do. I try to hold on to all scrap fabrics. I give all scrap fabrics back if it's over 1 inch. So if we hem some slacks and we you know, we give everything back, because a lot of times some people will hold on to this stuff and they'll write on there and they'll put it in a file system and they'll say this goes to such and such suit or such and such dress. If they ever get a little hole in it, or if they ever get some sort of a tear, or they need that little bit of material, so if they let it out again or something, that they have a little material to work with. So if it's over 1 inch, we try to give all the material back to the customer, and let them discard it as they see fit, you know. So we don't throw anything away. That's just, it's not a nice thing to do. I know there are tailor shops out there that just kind of, you know, kind of do a chop job, and they don't think about the customer first. And what you want to do is really please the customer first, and they would probably, most of them, like to have that little bit of material back. One, it proves that you did take in the garment, or you did alter the garment because you cut this piece off, right? So that's one way of saying that, hey, I worked on your clothing. And then the other one is, you know, what if they do want to add that material to another part of the garment? They have the extra material. So it's just really nice. And a lot of times, if you're working on bridal, you're working on dresses, some of these brides, instead of taking the whole dress to go match up shoes or to go and match up other things, they can take that little scrap material that you give them back to go match things up that go along with their outfit, right? So maybe a purse, or you just never know, right? So that's another way for them to use that scrap material. So you want to go ahead and make sure that you do give everything back to your clients. So then another one is, a lot of times you see like curvy women, and in the back of a dress, they will have where it ripples all the way up their back, right? It just ripples. They're like really curved when it comes to their waistline in the back, and they have all this rippling going across the back. Well, a lot of times what this means is, especially if the curving goes all the way around to the sides and that, a lot of times what this means is that the side seams on the hips is too tight. So if that's too tight, it will cause a ripple effect, and you want to release the side seams to let that ripple fall down, right? So you want to, you know, consider that when you see that ripple effect going on. And then the next one is when sewing curves and alterations. So like if you're sewing curves in a collar, and you're sewing curves like maybe on a waistline that's really curvy, maybe the you know, any kind of a curved seam. Now these curved seams, you don't really have to leave as much seam allowance in them. So if you have a really curvy body type that you're working with, you want to be able to, you know, release and cut some of the seam out, so it's not, you know, like you're leaving a whole big portion in there. It will curve and it will form to the body a lot better if you cut the seams down to maybe 3/8 of an inch or 1/2 of an inch, instead of having like a 1 inch where you take it in and you take in the sides or something like that, and you just leave all of that fabric in there. It won't lay nice to the body. It won't form to the body unless you cut some and trim some of that extra seam allowance out, right? When you're taking in the sides or, you know, stomach area, you know, waist area or whatever. And the same thing goes for if you're taking in the seat of a slack or you're taking in the waistband. If they're really curvy, a lot of times they're bigger in the hip area than they are in the waistline. And then so you have to really make this really deep curve, right? And when you do that, you don't want to leave all of that extra in there for that waistline that goes, you know, between the waist and the hip area. You want to trim some of that out of there so it will lay nice and flat. And always press your seams open as much as you can. Wherever you can get the seam pressed open, it just lays much nicer. It makes the garment hang the way that it should and hang much nicer as well. And then one other, let's see here. So when fitting or making clothing, for some of you out there are making clothing for other people, maybe making clothing for a curvy body type or something like that. One thing that I've found is when you have or you design a wider sleeve. So if you design a wider sleeve, it kind of gives the illusion that the body portion is thinner because of the wider sleeve. So it kind of helps to cover up some of their curvy body type and taking people's attention to the wider sleeve. You know, we have really wide sleeves that are in fashion right now. So so that's one way that you can kind of camouflage, you know, a wider body type or a bigger body type, a curvy body type, I should say. Sorry. And then the next one and last one, let's see here. When wearing two-piece garments, so a lot of times curvy people are not curvy all over. Well, they may be curvy all over, but they may have one portion of their body type larger than the other part, right? So some people are very top heavy, some people are very bottom heavy. It just depends. But a lot of times when you're designing clothing for these types of people, it's nice to see if they would consider having like a two-piece garment or a two-piece color coordination, because if you kind of put the print, if you put a print on their largest body portion, say if they're big in the top part, it will kind of camouflage, you know, them being so big in the top portion, and then put a solid color on maybe the skirt portion, right? And then it could still be one piece, but it's just two different fabric types, right? To kind of camouflage some of the, you know, the more curvy body type. So you can do that, and then put the, you know, the solid on the bottom, like I said. And so you'd have a print on top and a solid on the bottom. And then if they were the opposite, if they were, you know, larger on the hip area and the bottom area, then you could put the print on the bottom area and then have a solid top part. So it just goes the opposite, right? So those things are what I see, you know, with working with people. I did have a gal yesterday that had a curvy body type, and you know, it just depends. But the same thing with her. She was larger on the bottom than she was on the top. So I see a lot of this a lot. Is they buy these dresses and different garments because they're larger on the bottom than they are on the top. So then what do you end up with? You end up with, you know, the garment fits fine on the bottom portion, but then on the top portion, it may need to be taken in on the straps or shoulders. It may need to be taken in underneath the arms. It may be needed to be taken in at the zipper in the back. You know, it just totally depends on who you're fitting, what type of body type they are. And everybody is different. Everybody is made completely different. So it's hard to just define it to, you know, that type of a body type. It's it takes a lot. But I can say that the one thing is to make sure that when you go to do your fittings, that your pins are spot on, right? They are where the person that you're fitting feels comfortable, and they also, you know, have still a little wiggle room, you know, not a lot, but a little wiggle room where they're not going to feel like anything is tight. You don't want anything to pin it where it starts to pull something, like if you pin the sides and it starts to pull the zipper open or anything like that. You want things to just be relaxed, right? You don't want it to be, you know, anything real tight for people. So just go by your pins, basically, and, you know, ask permission to, if they have a body type like that and you're going to be working on a garment for them, I would ask their permission, you know, when you're doing the fitting. Say, hey, I'm going to be taking in your waist. I'm going to be taking in some of this stuff. And do I have your permission to cut the seams down to back to a 1/2 inch? Or do you want me to leave that whole fullness in the seam allowance? You know, ask their permission to cut out some of that. Now, you know, it just, some people will say, no, I don't want you to cut anything off, because maybe they fluctuate in size, right? So just, make a mental note of what you can do and what you can't do. And if they allow you to cut off some of that, where you can cut it down to a half inch or 3/8 or whatever of a seam allowance to make those really defined curves, their garment will probably turn out a little bit better. But then again, they won't have the option to ever let it back out again, right? So you have to explain this a little bit when you're going to do alterations on that type of a body type. And just make sure that you're touching base with them. Don't just go in there and just cut it anyway and do, a chop job. We want to leave seam allowance in our garments. When we work for people and we are sewing things for people, it's very important to have that seam allowance, because not everybody's made the same. Some people may need to let it out. Some people may need to take it in. But when you do that, you want to know, as the tailor, if you're able to have their permission to cut some of that out. And most people, if they're really a curvy body type, they will tell you, yes, whatever you have to do to make it look nice. If you need to cut it down to, smaller seam allowance just to make it, curve and flow and function, that's fine. Because when you sew curves and you leave only a small seam allowance, they will curve much better. And then you can also do a little clipping if you have to. But that's what helps it to really ease, right? We want to, when we're doing a body type that's a larger body type like that, a curvy body type, we want to make sure that the seams that we're sewing can lay flat and they can ease, right? And flow into the next portion of a larger section or a larger seam allowance. We want to make sure that it's flowing freely, right? So it's like contoured, right? We want to make sure that it's, really looks smooth. And so yeah, so those were the things and the tips that I see as problem areas in curvy body types. And these are all things that are workable. They're workable with your client. You can ask permission, you can explain to them what it is, and go from there. But so yeah, so I think I gave you some pretty helpful tips on working with that type of body type. And if I do find a customer that comes and is willing to let me film them and willing to let me do the fitting and to film it, I will also, put that on as well. But I haven't come across that quite yet. And but maybe eventually I will be able to do some of that. A lot of people don't want to, be on film. You know what I mean? It's something that's kind of, and it's hard to ask because, most brides and things that are coming in right now, it's for their big day, right? I'm making a great experience for them. And you don't want to be asking a lot of these questions and asking permission to do things that benefits myself, right? When you're working with clients, it's all about them. It's not about benefiting myself. It's about pleasing them and making their experience a pleasurable one, right? So it's a little bit difficult, but if I find a friend or I find somebody that comes in for alterations and, and we've been friends and it's just maybe something that's not for maybe like a bride, it's just, normal stuff, then I can maybe do something like that. But I'm not going to ask, a bride on their first fitting or anything like that, So, because I want it to be, all about them, their special day, and to make it really, special and sacred and stuff for them, right? So that's what we're here for, to make it a good experience for them. So anyway, thank you so much. Again, Karen Itin here. You can go ahead and look in the descriptions. You can find my website. You can find my tailoring book link. You can even donate. You can get a little message that says, please subscribe to this channel. I'd love to have you here. I love you guys. I pray for you guys, for all of my subscribers. And I think it's very nice that my numbers are starting to go up. I'm starting to get a little bit more followers, a little bit more traffic. I enjoy that. I love seeing that. I would love to be able to monetize this channel at one point. So if you like the content that I share here, please help me out a little bit by subscribing to this channel, liking my videos, and helping me boost my, my information for other people to learn from, right? So, so yeah, and then I also have, a lot of times I'll put in my videos a donation where you can donate, so I can constantly still take the time, even though I'm busy and I'm working and running businesses, that I can still take the time to do some of this video for you and bring things to you, you know, so you can still learn from, okay? So thank you so much for watching, and I look forward to talking to you all in the next video. Bye-bye now. Have a great weekend.